Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Social Equity Council Department of Consumer Protection webinar series. We are providing educational webinars on the process to participate in the adult cannabis license process lottery for the state of Connecticut. My name is Ginny Ray Clay. I am the interim executive director of the Social Equity Council, and joining me today is Rod Marriott, director of, and Rod, say your title.
Director of the Drug Control Division.
Okay, of the Department of Consumer Protection. So what that means is Rod is pretty much in charge of the regulated adult recreational use cannabis industry. Okay, so we've got a nice number of attendees. We have 24 folks on with us right now. So I'll tell you how, if you're not familiar, how this goes. Rod is going to do a presentation about the documents that are required for making application to the Department of Consumer Protection for a license under adult cannabis recreational use. And I will follow up with information on the documents that are required for social equity applicants. Okay, and so with that said, and once we finish the brief presentation, we will open the floor to questions from participants. And please put your questions in the Q&A, okay? As you are participating in this Zoom, you will not be able to talk to us. You will only be able to type your comments in the Q&A, okay? So without further ado, Rod, I'm gonna let you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much, Ginny Ray, and welcome everybody. I see some familiar names in the attendance list. I hope you guys got to see last night's presentation, although it was a repeat of last week's Lunch and Learn. I'm going to start sharing my screen now and go over with you all the documents required for the application process. Sorry, as I kind of navigate this. Can everyone see my screen there? Okay.
We can, yes.
Great. All right. Okay. So the required documents for application. We're going to start with the uploading process to just make sure that people have a good understanding of this process. But we have gone over this in the past, so it may look incredibly familiar to you. So before you start the application process, it's really critical that you get to know the Public Act 21-1 from the June special session and the department's policies and procedures for the adult use cannabis establishments. We also have many documentation checklists available on our website, and we'll kind of go through where those are, but you really want to review those before you get into that to make sure that you have the right documents to upload. Ideally, we'd like to see your documents in a PDF format, although we accept them in many formats, and a list of them are available. You'll see that on the next slide. So we start with uploading a document. So as you go through our applications, you will see this very kind of similar screen that occurs where it asks you to upload a document to answer a question or just directs you to provide documents specifically for certain information. When you do that, first thing you want to do is click Choose File. Choose File will bring you to this pop-up bubble here that actually probably looks very familiar to you, but it'll bring to file folders. So you want to make sure your file folders are identified very clearly before you start doing this process, and that your documents are laid out in a way that you understand exactly what's in that document. So you can put the right document into the right upload at the right time. As you can see, we accept a variety of file types: a bitmap, which is a BMP, which is a picture image; a doc, which is generally like a Word document, sometimes a Google document. DocX is just an advanced version through Microsoft. Where JPEGs or these two are basically image files. A PDF is the preferred format, and it keeps the document a little bit cleaner. PNG is another image. Excel, text, depending on what you're uploading, that may be appropriate. So once you do that, you select the document. You can only upload one document at a time. and then you press open. Once you do that, you press upload document. And I think the next screen kind of talks about uploading multiple documents. So once you've uploaded a document, you'll see that it pops up at the top right next to that trash can. If you upload a document inadvertently or you're doing it as a test, but still want to submit that application, you can delete that document. Then you press upload again, and you can upload multiple documents that way. So then you click choose file, find the next document that you'd look to upload for that particular your kind of question or inquiry in the application, and upload again. And you can upload multiple documents to that one question. So the majority of the time, the fields that have uploads are marked as mandatory. The mandatory field is denoted by the red asterisk, and that will tell you that you have to upload something to get through that section. And that can be particularly challenging in certain instances where maybe you don't need a Secretary of the State registration, for instance, because you are a sole proprietor. In those instances, you can upload a basic document that says, I'm a sole proprietor, I'm not required to register with the Secretary of State, and upload that document into this file set. And we have a kind of a sample of that here. Or you may not have that document just yet, because you don't necessarily have to have all your business formation as far as the Secretary of State and Department of Revenue Services are concerned until you kind of get a little farther along in our process. So you may want to just upload a document that says just that. And now I'm going to go over finding the document checklist. So when you go to ct.gov/cannabis, you click on Learn More, and under Adult Use Cannabis Licensing is the best way to navigate to this information. On that page, when you click that link, you're brought to this page, which is really kind of our general licensing overview page. As you can see, there's 14 different types of registrations and processes to get licensed in the state. And so you're going to want to pick the one that you're most interested in. So right now, for instance, we're going to pick the retailer license for this demonstration. So I'll have clicked that link and it navigates you onto this page. So at the top of this page, you'll see a general description of the license type and an actual link to the definition in the law, the requirements that pertain to this particular credential type, and a link to the Public Act and the policies and procedures. And as I spoke to earlier, you want to make sure you focus on understanding what those are and what those mean for you. It's important that I've mentioned this pretty much every presentation, that all backers are identified that are associated with the cannabis establishment application, and each one of those must complete an application in order to be considered as part of the process. In the documentation requirement section, you'll see a bunch of different links to other documents in our system. And so you'll see here we have initial application checklists for the general lottery, for social equity lottery, for equity joint ventures or social equity partners, social equity applicants in general for backers, and the backer application checklist for non-social equity applicants. Below that, you'll see an area about the fees and what the fees are charged for each one of those lottery processes. General documentation requirements. So once you click onto one of these documentation checklists, you'll see a document that looks a lot like this. This document is downloadable and generally easily printable, so that you can prepare for your application submission. I will also point out at this point, you can operate inside of our application process, and it will save and close and save documents for you as you go through. Your application isn't complete until you submit and pay the fee, but you want to make sure that if you are uploading test documents, that you take them down or delete that process. So if you decide to start the application process and get to a point where maybe you don't want to proceed yet because you have to get more documents, or you're just testing it to see, you can delete that entire entry and start a new entry clean and fresh. And it's probably important that you do that, especially if you uploaded kind of test or like just general documents to see the application process. And this way you're prevented from potentially uploading a document that you don't want to be reviewed because it's not complete. For your initial application, you will not need a location for your business. Some of the business documents, depending on if it's a social equity council, an application that's going to be reviewed by the Social Equity Council, registration with the Secretary of State, a sales use tax and tax permit from the Department of Revenue Services. These documents are required for final license. While you don't need them now, it's a good idea to start thinking about them if you're selected in the lottery. For the documents for the backer, you'll see some of the requirements here, but a backer is an individual only. So you won't even be able to access the backer application if the account that you create on e-license is for a business. It's important to understand also that if you have a business that you've applied for, you will need to create a separate account for the individual that's applying for the backer license. So you may need to have two sets of credentials for e-license, one for the business, one for the individual. Backer applications must be received by the close of the application window. This is a very, very important part. If it's going to be included and reviewed, it needs to be done and completed and submitted before the application period is over. You don't pay a fee for that backer application until you've been selected from the lottery. So that happens at a later stage. That completes my part of the presentation for today, but I will be staying on for questions as we go forward. Ray, I will turn it to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually trying to get my, okay, I just got a brand new computer this morning because my other one fried last night. So I had to get everything all set up again. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to go over, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I will have office hours for the social equity applicant verification documents, and I'll go over each section in one of those sessions. So I will have an office hours for residency, I'll have an office hours for income, and I'll have an office hours for ownership. And those are going to be, I think it's just like, it's 3 days and it's within a 2-week period. So I put them very close together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go over what appears on the website. So let me make sure that I can, which screen do I want to share? Let's see how this works. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, can you see that screen, Rod or Diana?
Yes, I can. So
Oh, okay.
Trying to give you a thumbs up. Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so I can't, let me just, I'm going to turn my camera off because I have to look in a different direction to get this information. All right, so with that said, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so the first document and the first information we're going to go over is the social equity residence verification. This information that you see up here at the top is just information from the Public Act. And so I'm going to skip down to the definition of a social equity applicant. And most of you who have been following through this process, excuse me, who have been active in this process will know that a social equity applicant is a person who is looking to obtain a license in the cannabis industry in which they own 65% and control the venture, the social equity applicant or licensed venture that you are looking to get involved with. The other 35% is owned by someone who is not applying, or can be someone who's not applying as a social equity applicant. Understanding that anyone who owns 5% or more of ownership or control in the company will have to provide information. So those folks who are on the other end, a lot of the structures are being set up where it is 65% social equity and 35% backer. And those are the folks who are investing in the business and have some ownership and control in the business. So for the residency requirement for the social equity applicant, you must have resided, you and or your family resided in a disproportionately impacted area for, and there's two different criteria. You had to have either lived there 5 of the 10 most recent years. So last year, the year before, you had to live in the disproportionately impacted area, or 9 years of the first 18 years of your life. So grew up, your family lived in a disproportionately impacted area as it is defined by the census tracts that also appear on our website. So we do have information on the disproportionately impacted areas and what those areas are. So you must have lived within those for one of those two criteria, not both. The documents that we are looking for you to provide, in the beginning there was a little bit of confusion, but this is where we are clear. So a government issued photo ID card, it could be a license, it could be a state ID, your social security card, and the long form of the birth certificate that includes your name and will also include your parents' name. This is why we're asking for the long form, because if you need to show us the deed that certainly is not in your name, but is in your family name, your parents' name, this is how we will be able to match up that you belong to the people who lived in the disproportionately impacted area, or you are currently living, or as of last year, lived in the disproportionately impacted area. So the other documentation, now you can submit, and as it says here very clearly, you can submit one or a combination, and that is for all of the other criteria that we're looking for as well. So for income, you can submit one or a combination, and I'll get to that sheet in just a moment. So bank records that include your name, residential property deeds that includes your name. Now in this one, property deeds, if you are coming in as lived in the disproportionately or grew up in the disproportionately impacted area, that deed can be the deed of your family and their home. Housing authority records, if you or your family lived in housing authority managed properties, you can ask the housing authority to provide you with that information. You may have some information related to that already. A signed notarized lease agreement with your landlord. If you are currently living in a DIA, or last year or the year before you had a lease in your name, you must get that lease notarized. I want everybody to understand that when you submit the documentation for social equity verification, it's a pass or fail. Either you are or you're not. And there's not any wiggle room in between. It's not, well, they gave us the lease, but it's, we're missing 2 months. If you're missing 2 months, if you haven't dotted your I's or crossed your T's, you would, as we affectionately say, you will fail, and you will not be certified as or verified as a social equity applicant. Other information that you can provide: school records that includes your name, utility bills, gas, water, electric, but again, must include your name or your family name and the address of which that utility bill was serviced at or provided service to. Insurance policy that includes your name. If your parents had a policy on you, if you had a policy on yourself, your address would be there. We will look at that information as well. Dated notices of correspondence from local state government agencies, again, DCF, DSS, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and also, folks who have been incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. There are some restrictions, but not, cannabis related or drug restrictions for you to apply for a license in the cannabis industry. But again, we do have a listing of offenses that would prevent you from applying, but they are generally, what we call like white collar crime. So it's identity theft. I'm not going to list them all because they are listed on the website, but I would encourage you to go and look at those crimes that would prevent you from applying for a social equity license under the Department of Consumer Protection. And let me see if I can get to. So those are the residency documentation that we are looking at and that we will accept. Again, if you were formerly incarcerated, you would get, we can take some other documents, and I would encourage you to send me an email if you have a question on that documentation. I think a letter is going to be fine, but sec@ct.gov if you have questions about documentation for residency, ownership, and income. So let me go to the income verification document. Okay, so let me be clear with you on this. We are using one single number to make this easy for folks to calculate, to determine if you are eligible for social equity as a social equity applicant based on income. So the number, the area median income number or household median income number that we're using is $78,444. The way that you're going to calculate your income is you are going to need to provide income information for anyone in your household, regardless of relationship, that is 21 years or older. So if you live with an uncle, if an uncle lives with you, if you live with a cousin, if you live with a friend, or a friend lives with you and they are over the age of 21 and they are in your household, whatever the relationship is, we don't care. As long as they're in that house and they're over 21, you must provide their information or include the calculation. We're not asking you for their income tax. We're asking you to include the calculations of their income. If they are involved in the cannabis business, you would need to provide verification of their income if they're at the 65%, or anyone 5% who has 5% ownership or more. And it is income over the last 3 years immediately preceding the application. So that means last year, your income tax for last year. If you filed your income tax already for this year, you would include this year's, for last year's income. So the last 3 years, okay? The total household income per year cannot exceed, it's 200, and Rod, help me out, it's 235,300 and I believe $32 for your total household income. If your household income exceeds the $235,332 threshold by $1, by 1 penny, you are over the income. As I said, this is a pass fail. Either you're within the threshold or you are not. So the items that we're taking and we will look at to verify your income is a notarized income verification from your employer. Now, this also can be these documents or a combination thereof the documents to total out the 3 years. So notarized income verification from your employer, pay stubs for the last 3 years, or pay stubs for the last 2 years. So it doesn't have to be all 3 years. So we should probably take the 3 years out because you don't need to submit all 3. You can do a year worth of income tax. You can do a year's worth of pay stubs, wage and tax statements for the last 3 years, your W-2s. Also Social Security, if that is your form of income. So your letter, and it tells us what you're making or what you're receiving over the last 3 years. You must also include the pension, retirement, distribution statement. So if you have, again, it's your total income. If you're collecting a pension and you're working, You would need to include the pension information as well as your income from employment. If all of that is on your tax return, then you would just need to submit your tax return. Someplace that is a good idea to go, if you filed with the IRS, you can ask for a record of account transcript. And there is on our website, the link to that is here. Like I said, this is the actual document from the website. And the IRS will send you, and I believe this is free. They will send you the last 3 years. So the 3 years that you asked them for, or the current tax year and returns processed through the IRS. You can get that all in one document. So if you're struggling with putting these things together and you filed your income tax over the last 3 years, let's say you can't find, the furthest away here, try this website and get your account transcripts. And then again, annuity statements, pension statements, court-ordered agreements. If you have a lawsuit, we need to know that is, part of your income. Unemployment benefits, workers' compensation, and then again, for our folks who have been incarcerated, if you have questions on what you can submit, please submit your question to sec@ct.gov, and we will get back to you. And if we need to have an offline conversation, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay, so the number you want to remember is $235,332. If your total household income, meaning anyone who lives in your house that is over 21, you must provide income information and calculate their income in your documents that you are sending for proof and verification. Now, the one that gets a little bit, sometimes gets, let's say it's confusing, but it's a little bit more cumbersome, is the ownership of the company. Now, a lot of folks may not have are going to apply as a social equity applicant, and you don't need to have the business to qualify as a social equity applicant, but you do need to let us know that you are in control and that you own that company. So I'm going to go over this again. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because this information is on our website, but I want to point out just a couple of things that for frequently asked questions that we've been getting on this. Okay, so these documents here, it says the following documentation is required to establish ownership and control of a social equity venture. Now, depending on your structure, this group of documents here and here, these three that are up here, and these are what applies to your company. A lot of these documents may not apply depending on your structure. So I guess maybe what we should have done is, instead of saying in addition, this is what's really important for you to determine which of these documents you need to submit. So partnership and joint equity ventures. You need to provide the original and any amended partnership agreements. So that's what actually establishes your business. If you and your best friend are going to start a cannabis business, and let's say it's going to be delivery or transportation, or a different kind, and your business structure is a partnership or a joint venture, you will have to put together a partnership agreement that outlines who's who, what's what, and who is responsible. So if you're doing the partnership, if it's 50-50, both of you own equal share of the company. And then whatever your agreement is, and I would strongly suggest that you get legal advice as you're putting together the partnership agreement. Okay, this is your agreement to go into business together, is a legal binding business arrangement. And it should not be perceived as a friendship arrangement, or, I mean, it could be a friendly arrangement, but in a legal sense, you want to be very, very clear and outlining who does what, who's responsible for what, who puts in how much money, how that money is going to be spent. So make it a legal agreement, make it a business agreement. that is not based on emotion, that is based on fact and how businesses are run. All right. And then for the corporation or the LLC, if you have established a corporation and that's how you're going to show us that you how you own and operate this business, then you will have to provide what is called your corporate book. And your corporate book is all of these documents. So you would have had to incorporate, you would have had to have the articles of incorporation or the articles of organization if you're an LLC, signed by the state officials. So you would have to have submitted this information if you incorporated in Connecticut to the Connecticut Secretary of the State. If you incorporated in a different state, you would give us the same information from the Secretary of that state or the authorizing entity. Certificate of good standing that you have paid all of what you need to pay to the Secretary of State to keep your business registered and registered properly, that you have updated all of your corporate information, and that's how you get your certificate of good standing. Both sides of all corporate stock certificates. Now, if you don't have this information, if you're not a stock holding company, then you would not submit this, but you do have to show how your company ownership is structured. Okay, shareholder agreements. If people have bought shares in your company, if they're investing in your company right now, we want to see that information as well. Minutes of the stakeholders or the stockholders or the board of directors meeting for the past 2 years. You are required by law as a corporation to have an annual meeting of your corporation. Okay, corporate bylaws, any amendments to those bylaws. A lot of times you start a business and then you find that you have to amend your bylaws for one reason or another. Companies are evolving, they're ever changing, they're growing, they're they're reducing their size, they're for a variety of reasons, but your corporate bylaws is really your Bible of how your corporation operates. And that's what the IRS is going to look at. That's what the Secretary of the State's going to look at. That's what Consumer Protection is going to look at, or a bank if you're looking for money. Any corporate bank resolutions and or the signature cards for those people who have control and are authorized signatory for financial relationships or personal purchasing relationships for the company. Again, membership certificates and ledgers, again, only if the LLC has issued memberships. An LLC could be 2 people, it could be 4 people. And basically what the LLC does is it says that you have limited liability in that company and that you are only responsible, let's say, God forbid you were sued, you would only be responsible for the amount of investment that you have made in the company. So if it's 4 people and you 25%, you are responsible for 25% of that company, and that is it, unless there's a different type of arrangement. Okay, and again, certificate of good standing, certificate of existence, certificate of status. So that's just a little note on there. So these are the documents in addition that we will require to show us the structure of your company. And then again, these documents, if you're a sole proprietor, you would not be, we're not looking at these except for some things like the federal tax returns, all your Schedule Cs that are related to the business and any other schedules or attachments related to the business. If you have been designated or have received the certification of MBE, WBE, it's a good idea to submit that information because that is also could be significant as it relates to the social equity status of your company. Okay, so those are just kind of the things that I wanted to stick out there. Some people, if you don't have a personal net worth statement, don't worry about it. It's not all of these documents. It is the documents that are relevant to your company structure, or to your sole proprietorship of a business. And that's what I'm going to go over. We did have the social equity equity joint venture, but I will just tell you a little secret that the I can talk, that the equity joint venture, the EJV, is the same to, you need to provide the same requirements as you do for ownership and control of the company, because that's what that is. Now, the difference between the EJV and the social equity is the EJV is at least, you have to own at least 50%, not 65. 50% by the social equity applicant, and then the other 50% could be owned by the backers or the folks that have agreed to work with you to become an equity joint venture. Okay, so I am going to now stop sharing my screen, which I think I have done successfully, and I'm gonna come back on camera, but for whatever reason, my mouse is not working to allow me to come back on camera. So hold on one second. All right, let's go ahead and get started, because let me figure out why my mouse pad is not allowing me to click my camera on. So that's always interesting. Okay, let's see here. Oh, here we go. Okay, great. So I hope that information was helpful to you all. I know Rod's information was extremely helpful, and we have a couple of questions here. Okay, so one question is a bank card and/or a bank account required for social equity application process? It is not. It is not. To show that you are a social equity applicant, we do not need a bank card or a signature card. If some of that information actually may be needed later in the process. Okay. For social equity, household income qualifiers is based on an average 3 years. Yeah, and then it's 70. Now remember, it is 78,444 is the number that we're using to calculate. And so let's see. So 235,332 is the number, not 232, 332 is the number that your total household income per year cannot exceed. So in 2021, your household income could not exceed $235,332. That's for that single year. Okay, so hope that is clear. Okay. Rod, did you want to go over any questions that have already been answered? I see there's several questions that have been answered, but I think folks can see them.
Yeah, there was one about backer. I think in general, when I refer to backer and backer applicants, it's based on the definition of the backer. So if the person either meets that 5% threshold of ownership or has some kind of control over the organization, then those backers need to apply.
Okay. Is the $235,332 an average of all household members' income or the total sum of the house? So remember, we are looking for information from anyone who is in your household that is 21 years or older. So if you have a 17-year-old cousin that lives in the house, if you have a 16-year-old child that lives in the house, an 18-year-old child, an 18-year-old cousin, an 18-year-old aunt, we are not looking for their income. We are looking for the income of all of the residents of the household who are over 21 years old and have income. If they don't have any income, well, you don't have any income for them. So it is household income. Since we are business owners and our gross income is based on our adjusted, is based on our adjusted gross. For your personal tax returns, it's based on the adjusted gross. Yes. Will there be any opportunities to fundraise or obtain a loan after license is obtained, or do all funds need to be identified during the application process? I'm going to answer part of this, and I think Rod may have also something to add to this. So the state of Connecticut, through the Social Equity Council and the Department of Economic and Community Development, we are currently working on a low interest loan for those folks who are granted provisional licenses and need funding to start your business. We know right now that you cannot borrow money from a bank, from a federally insured bank, or a credit union that is federally insured. You may be able to borrow money from a community bank that is not federally insured. If you want to know about those federally insured versus those institutions that are non-federally insured, I would encourage you to go to the Department of Banking's website and look up information on those. I think there's like 2 or 3 non-federally insured banks that are community banks in the state, but don't quote me on that. That information will be on the Department of Banking's website. So as far as your investors and the ownership is concerned, I believe you will have to identify all of those folks in ownership positions prior to receiving the social equity status and or to receiving your provisional license. But once the provisional license has been granted to you, we will have funds available for working capital, for machinery and equipment, inventory. So we're finalizing the details of that program, the terms and the conditions of the lending, what you have to provide us when you're making a loan. So please understand that if you are considered a social equity applicant, and you're going to borrow money, the two are not exclusive. So you will still need to follow banking or borrowing criteria. So if you have horrible credit, if you have filed bankruptcy on multiple occasions, because you're a social equity applicant with a provisional license, it doesn't give you sort of a step up in the borrowing section. These funds that we will be lending people are taxpayers' dollars, and we still have to be very responsible for them. So if you need to do some things with cleaning up your credit, I would strongly suggest that you work on doing that, because the lending criteria is going to be much different than the verification criteria for social equity applicants.
And so just to kind of add to what Jenny Ray had there, if that fundraising provides an ownership stake at all, or part of the business is leveraged for the purposes of the kind of repayment of that loan, that wouldn't be permissible. That would be an ownership stake potentially and cause that person to have been registered as a backer. So if you do that after, you could have an issue there. So really it depends on the structure of the loan and fundraising and whether that person has a stake or not, and if it has any implications on the organizational structure thereafter. I think in general, when you start to consider these applications, any kind of org chart that you submit should sufficiently lay out the structure so the department can understand the cannabis establishment's overall organization. The chart will be used by the department to confirm proper disclosure of individual backers, and identify any individuals with any overall financial interest in the cannabis establishment. It would meet that threshold. So it's really important to make sure that those organizational charts are laid out exactly the way that your business is being structured. And so just consider that as you create these documents.
Okay, let's see. So this one is saying that I believe that Diana said the last 3 years, correct. We can't exceed that amount to qualify for Social Security. I don't know if that's a statement or a question. I don't know what you, to qualify, I'm sorry, this is social equity. So we can't, right, you cannot exceed 230, what do we say, $235,332, your total household income in any of the past 3 years. So if you did your income tax for 2021 and you total up everyone's income tax adjusted gross and it exceeds 200 and all totals exceed 235,332, you would not qualify as a social equity applicant. And if you were below that for the past, the 2 years preceding that, if that 1 year you exceed it, you do not qualify. It has to be under for all 3 years. Okay. What is the limit household income per year? $235,332. $78,444 was the number that the council selected to use as the median income. So you take that number and you multiply that by 3, and that gives you the total household income for the year, regardless of household size. Okay, what about if you are staying with a relative, but you are completely financially independent of them? Do you still need to consider them as part? Yes. If you are living in a household with a relative, that is your household. It is regardless of relationship. You could be living in a, in a household that is, just a friend. You would need to consider them as part of the household. And again, it's 21 and older who lives in the household with you or you live with. 21 years and older, that regardless of relationship, you have to provide their information. So it says, will the applicant be allowed to raise money via a safe note or convertible loan, which only offers equity ownership after the 3 years? Emmanuel, what I'm going to ask you to do is to take this question and submit it to sec@ct.gov. And Rod, I don't know if this is something you want us to forward to you as well, but I think they're asking just about social equity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it focuses there. I think it also really depends on the document and the terms of that agreement. And so, there's also kind of a slope here where it's hard to really comment on some of those things without seeing an actual document.
Right. And that's and so what I know my office probably won't do is so we tried not to say, okay, yes, this works, because there's so many other factors to being qualified as a social equity applicant. We don't want to tell you that this works. And then there's another part of this verification that you may not meet, or when we really get that documentation and we look at it, and it's being looked at by our forensic accountants, that they determine that this does not meet the criteria for one reason or another. We don't want you to believe that we've given you a green light. Okay. Do backers at 5% or more have to identify their exact capital contribution to the social equity entity? Can this amount be adjusted, or does it need to be stated and set in stone? I believe you have to identify the exact capital contribution. If they're 5% or, well, if they're 5% ownership or more, I do not believe you have to identify their exact, but you're going to have to tell us how they're 5%. So how are they 5% owner? Is it because they're investing a certain amount of money? It's because they bought stock in that company. So again, these are some of those questions that we cannot answer. We need a little bit more information. If you want to submit the question to SEC at ct.gov, I'm happy to take a look at it and provide you what I can without, again, giving you an okay or an approval. Okay, I don't know, Mr. Buds, it says even less than 5%. That might have been part of another question. But if you have less than 5% ownership, we're not looking for information on those people, on those partners who own less than 5% of the business. Okay, just to clarify, for self-employed applicants applying for social equity at the SEC is looking for at their adjusted income and not the gross receipts. We're looking at adjusted. If you're a sole proprietor, we're looking at adjusted. But you must provide all of your Schedule C for your sole proprietorship. So it's not just income. You have to do everything related to the business. I have documentation that has my name and date of birth on it, but not my address. However, the form demonstrates the Hartford Board of Education of Ed school-based health clinic, which is in a DIA, provided shots to me at 5 years old, and again at 12. I'll ask you to forward this question to SEC at ct.gov so I can just take a little bit better look at it. But if the health clinic was in the DIA, that's not proof that you lived in the DIA because you received shots or vaccinations in the DIA at the health clinic. You would still have to show your the address that you lived at, and if those vaccination records have your family's address, we can use those records to determine that you lived in the DIA, but not the clinic. You didn't live at the clinic. Okay, so if you have a backer who owns less than 5% and has no control of the company, do you only have to identify them? You're not identifying anyone who owns less than 5% of the company. We're not asking for information on folks that own less than 5% of the company. Okay. Good questions. So we've answered those. And oh, whoa, the time flies today. It's 12:53. So we have another 8 minutes. If you think of something after, and it's related to the social equity application process, verification of social equity, please send those questions to sec@ct.gov, and I will be happy to look at them and provide information that I can. Again, some of the scenarios, we may not be able to provide you with answers or additional information. So we will do the best we can to give you as much information as we can to help you make the decision to provide information and to know what documents to submit. So one other question is tax year for proof of income are. It is the 3 tax years immediately preceding your application. So this is 2022. You would be looking at 2021. And again, if you have not filed your 2021 taxes, you may want to do that You may not be able to do that. You may be looking for an extension. If you are looking for an extension, I would provide that information as well, but I wouldn't wait. I mean, April 15th or April 18th, I believe, is the deadline for filing your taxes. So if you have not requested an extension, we will be expecting to see your 2021 taxes, 2021, 2020, and 2019 at this point.
So I think there's a general thing that I would probably say here. Applications and the submission of the applications, the applications are not pre-reviewed by SEC or us. So you have to submit your applications kind of understanding and doing the best you can to comply with the documents. We do not pre-approve them before they're reviewed or pre-screen them. And we're not able to give pre-clearance on any document that is submitted or plans to be submitted. So you just understand that in general kind of restriction. And then Ginny Ray and myself and the agency are not permitted to give legal advice. I know there are a number of attorneys on here who are very interested in this business that are willing to help clients, I'm sure, as well. And at certain points of time, attorneys on here are going to need to make the decisions on the behalf of their client for purposes of submission of these applications and the appropriate documents. In general, when you start to submit these documents around org charts and the business arrangements, it's important for clarity. So submitting a backer application for someone that may or may not be 100% guaranteed to have that 5% because there's someone that may fall on some line, or the ownership and control may be unclear. It's probably in your best interest to submit as opposed to not submit, but we can't necessarily direct you in those because each one of those kind of situations may be a bit nuanced. So it is one of the challenges to answering questions here, and just want to make sure that people have a general understanding of that issue.
Okay, the last 3 minutes that we have, I'm gonna, because I need to look at a different screen, so I don't want to look crazy here. So I'm going to go off camera for one hot second and let you know that today is March 2nd. So we did the required documents for application. On March 8th, we will repeat this same webinar live at 6 o'clock. For all of you who are part of our distribution list, you will receive this information if you have not already received an invitation to join the webinar again. All of the webinars that we have presented to date are listed or are recorded and posted on our websites, as well as on the SEC Social Equity Council, Connecticut Social Equity Council YouTube channel. So you can tell your friends if they missed it. We try to do them during the day and in the evening to make it available to as many people as possible. Okay, so Rod, I do thank you and your team for doing that, for being on at 6 o'clock at night and for being on during the lunch hour as well. And I hope folks are enjoying these and finding these to be very helpful. I will also share with you that on the 15th of March, I will hold office hours at 4 o'clock to talk more about income requirements. So if you missed or didn't come up with another question around income, on the 15th of March, I will hold office hours via Zoom for 1 hour and only discuss the income questions that you have. On the 17th, I will hold office hours and I will discuss ownership and control, only that topic on that day. And then on the 8th of March at 12 o'clock, I will hold office hours on residency and residency requirements. So we're giving you, many opportunities to ask us questions, to seek answers that we can provide you. So, join us for those. Again, if you're on our distribution list, we will invite you to attend these continued webinars. And if you have folks that are interested in participating, please take the invitation that we provide you and share it with them. So again, dcp.org/events sec.cannabis@ct.gov
Very good.
and sec@ct.gov. So Department of Consumer Protection special email address to answer your questions related to the lottery, to the application, to regulations around adult use cannabis, recreational use cannabis, and any questions related to the social equity application, verification, and review of those qualifications can be sent to our website. And with that said, it is 1 o'clock. I thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again. Diana, thank you as always with the quick fingers responding to questions. And Rod, thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for attending, and see you next week.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a good day.